So, welcome to the Friday evening Sangha call. Today, we are going to talk about the middle path. And that I know that everybody has kind of heard about the middle path, but one of the most important points that we can talk about is in the Dhamma Chakravartanta Sutta, which is listed as and well known to be the very first teaching that the Buddha gave. And the very first thing that he said in his very first sermon was about the middle path. Wow, that kind of puts an importance to it. If we can understand what we mean by the middle path, then we can really get someplace with the teaching of the Buddha. Um, the original middle path had to do, the way that it was stated, was between sensual desire and self-mortification, in the sense of chasing spiritual path or just an ordinary life. That if people in an ordinary life will make it into the middle path, then they will avoid harming themselves, and they will also avoid seeking sensual pleasures. What I mean by sensual pleasures is, at the worst case, or the very far extreme, would be like drinking alcohol, um, going to the brothel, uh, uh, let us say going onto the dating sites and making too many dates, and other things like this. So that would be the ordinary life. But in the spiritual world, uh, where we have a lot of people who, especially in Western Buddhism, think that jhanas are the very best. But the Buddha also puts the jhanas into the idea of uh, pleasurable things, and seeking the jhanas would be the same thing as seeking higher and higher pleasures. So, uh, pleasure on one side and actual pain on the other are the two extremes of the middle path. And someplace in the middle of all of that is where we want to go. Now, here's one of the most interesting things is that if you were on the extreme to the left, let's say, and you look over to the extreme on the right, and you see someone in the middle, then that person appears as if they were really on the right. But if you are on the right side, extreme right, looking left, and you see someone in the middle, they will also look like they're on the left. That it's kind of hard to define a balance, and we can see that middle path or that middle balance issue even in American politics. So that if somebody is on the left, then anybody who's tending towards the right is right. And so when they talk about it, they talk about center left and center right and this kind of stuff, to where in fact what we're really looking for is a balance. Now, this balance can be seen in many, many different ways. In the sense that if we are talking about anapanasati and have wholesome thoughts like no place to go and nothing to do, that's a middle path point between always having something to do and always having some place to go. But if you carry that too far, nothing, no place to go and nothing to do, to the extreme, which is what most, then in fact I've had actual students talk about that. Oh, well, if I have nothing to go, no place to go and nothing to do, then that means that I'll just lay in bed all day and or day after day. And the answer to that is no, you won't lay in bed all day, day after day, because you will get up to go to the bathroom. You do have something to do. You have some place to go. Or you will get up and make some food. You do have some place to go. So The middle path, then, when we talk about no place to go and nothing to do, we're talking about not an extreme point, but a middle path point, so that we can kind of avoid doing too much. But if you take the no place to go and nothing to do too far, then it looks like that it's at the extreme of you don't go to the bathroom, you don't eat, you don't breathe, you don't do nothing. And that's pretty extreme. So we can always talk about the teachings of the Buddha is actually some sort of middle point between two extremes. Knowing that if you're at one extreme, then the middle path kind of looks like the other extreme. That you have to really understand what the two extremes are so that we can find a middle path. Alec, does that kind of introduce what you're talking about when you were asking the question about the middle path?
Yes.
Okay, so if we can then apply the middle path to everything that we do in life, then we can have the great advantage of the teaching of the Buddha. That's really the major important point of the teaching of the Buddha is that if we can find a middle path, then we can avoid dukkha. That the middle path point, whatever it is in any two extremes that you can think of, the middle path point then is the not dukkha. It's the dukkha nirodha. And that any one of the extremes then is going to be dukkha. So if we can avoid the streams and stay in the middle path, then we're going to be avoiding dukkha. Anna, you had your hand up.
Yes, how to avoid pain? I think it's maybe some trick to avoid pain, not emotional, but physical pain.
Well, physical pain is, let us say that there's more than one kind of physical pain. In fact, there's many different ways to describe pain, and that there's many different things that occur. One point that I can start to make is that things that used to be quite painful now are not painful at all. They're just sensations. That the difference between physical pain and sensation is the feeling, the emotional feeling of not liking it. All right. Now, let's talk about one particular kind of physical pain because I've experienced this a number of times. I don't even know how many bones that I've broken, but I do know that a broken bone and the healing of the broken bone can be considered painful. Especially when, let us say that the arm is broken in this area right here. If the arm is broken, then the doctor will set it. The setting process, they will often give the student or the patient shots in order to relieve the pain while they're setting the bone. But once they set the bone in a cast, now the issue is, what is that pain all about? Well, there's two actual kinds of pain that are associated with a broken bone. One of them is that when there's any movement in the arm, then the arm will scream in pain saying, don't do that, I'm healing here. And then the other kind of pain that happens in the healing process of a broken bone inside the cast is itching. Now, the itching itself is actually a kind of proof that the healing is happening. The other kind of pain, hello, Corey, good to see you. The other kind of pain in the broken arm is when the patient moves the arm. So, and that actually slows down the healing. The reason that the pain is there is basically a message. The message is don't move this broken arm, because if you're moving the broken arm, it unsets it. The example would be that a kid in high school or something breaks his arm, his right arm, and now he's in class and he wants to take notes. Well, if he takes notes with that right hand because he's right-handed and he's holding the pencil and doing that kind of stuff, or maybe he's picking up a cup of coffee with that while the arm is still in a sling, it's going to heal very slowly. That I've talked with Scott about this quite a bit, in the sense that in order for the healing to happen, the arm has to be still. It has to be immobile. And if we are moving our hands, like holding coffee or writing or whatever like that, and moving that hand, that actually, if you'll look at it, it's actually moving the muscles in this part of the arm. And that muscle movement then will interfere with the healing of the bone. And that's why the pain comes in. The pain is coming in basically is because it's not healing correctly. And so this is a kind of an introduction now to all kinds of pain, that in fact it has a lot to do with our attitude. If the kid has the attitude of, oh, I've got to live my life and I got to go do what I got to do, then his arm is going to heal very slowly. But if he has the attitude, his number one job is to get that arm healed, then he's going to keep it immobile. He's going to do what's needed to be done to keep it still. So there are two kinds of pain then that the kid has to react to. One is the itching of the arm. While it's healing, the healing process itself has sensations that we refer to as itching. But there's also those very sharp pains that happen that only happen when we're moving the arm. But in fact, when my knee was giving trouble last month, and it'd be good to announce that that's about healed now. And the reason that it was healing was because I made sure to not move the leg, to let it sit. And that by letting it sit, that in fact there was one time when Lucky here was in the bed with me, and I moved around, but I moved around her, and by doing so, bent the knee and got really, really sharp pain, really sharp cracking sounds, etc., like that. And that was an indication from that knee, you don't move me like that. I'm not ready to start flexing and jumping around. You got to keep me still. Okay, so you can think of then is message that that pain is of basically two types. One is a pain of healing when it's healing correctly, and the other pain is a pain that's a message saying, don't do that. Don't do what you're doing. Now, most people just think of all pain as, I don't like it. That in fact, one of the things that people will do will be, if their hand is hurt, then they'll start moving it. They'll start testing it. That's not the right thing to do. If the hand is hurt, if it's injured, if it's got a cut or a broken bone or whatever like that, then keeping it immobile. Because if we're flexing it, that's what's causing the pain. We don't like the pain. We want the pain to go away, and we're almost forcing it to go away by flexing it. Now, there's another kind of issue that we can talk about, and that is that the pain that comes in the legs and other parts of the body when people are sitting too long in a particular posture. That postures actually get old. Now, one of the things that that we see in Western Buddhism is that they think that sitting meditation is what Buddhism is really all about. That in fact, I just talked to Cathal yesterday. He just got out of a retreat over at Deepa Bhawan, and now he's heading back to the Wat that he was staying in at Wat Rusi Pa Siangtang, long name, on the other side of the island that he used to stay at. And the abbot, when he was there the first time, the abbot says, I'm really surprised that all of these Westerners, all they think about is sitting in meditation, because he's had a lot of Westerners on this island. It's kind of a party island, and a lot of Westerners come. And the Westerners who come seem to be sitting in meditation all day long, or as much as they can, just like as if they were in a retreat. And the abbot was saying that, oh no, that the Asians, the Thai people who were in the Wat. Well, hello, Alex. Good to see you. So we're talking about right now that Kat was mentioning that the abbot of the Wat, where he's staying on Koh Phangan, was musing about the Westerners sit in meditation too long or too much of the day. They think that because they do retreats, that that's all there is to do, that Buddhism is nothing but doing a retreat, so sitting in sitting meditation. And so the abbot was musing with Kat about that. Now I asked Kat then, well, don't they do the evening meditations and having a sitting after that? And I mentioned because in many of the Wats that they've been at, that they sit for about 20 minutes. But Kat says, oh no, at their Wat, after the chanting, they sit for about 45 minutes. But that's all the abbot and the people at the Wat sit, is for about 45 minutes. Now, even for some people, that's too long. But in Goenka retreats, they try to sit for an hour. And what happens with the body when it's sitting too long, it begins to have pain. Now, in the Goenka style, they think that, oh, well, the pain is good because that's going to get your mind strong to be able to handle that pain. And Goenka talks about that in the sense of it's not pain, it's just strong sensation. Well, Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and the Buddha would both disagree with that by saying if the body is in pain, then do something, go to the middle path, and come out of that pain. That we don't sit there in pain, struggling with pain, in thinking that by being able to master and handle pain, we can, let us say, gain some benefit from the meditation in a
That
Dhamma
all of a
sense.
sudden something will come along and do something magical for us if we just hurt bad enough.
Yeah, right. If we just hurt bad enough, if we get, that's exactly right. That's much of the mentality that if
Just
I
gotta
sit and
turn
go
it up.
if I sit long enough and start to have pain, then that pain that I'm having will build up some sort of benefit, some merit, and that when the merit meter gets high enough, then the karma machine is going to waltz in and do some Shaktipat and make me feel good.
Just release you right then and there.
Right. And it doesn't work that way at all. What really happens instead is that when we are sitting in pain, we should notice that we're sitting in pain and do something about it, to change our posture, to shift around, maybe to move the knees around or something like this, so as to eliminate that pain. Now, much of the pain sometimes comes from the fact that sitting for such a long time, it cuts off the circulation. And the lower part of the leg is screaming about, I'm not getting any blood here, folks. And it's not wise to sit and sit and sit, even though the leg is complaining because it's not getting what it needs. That I personally know 5 different people. Almost all of them have been monks, and many of them are still monks. One of them is dead. But in fact, we can talk about the one who's just died recently, Bhante Villamaramsi. If you have noticed him, you will never see him sitting on the floor in sitting meditation. He is always sitting in a chair. All right. I know another monk, Subato, who is now living in Malaysia. He was here at Wat Suan Mok, but he left out of embarrassment because he could not sit with the monks. And the reason for that was because he had ruined his legs by sitting in sitting meditation too long. In fact, it seems to happen to the guys who go to Burma. And they see these Burmese guys sitting for 14 hours, and they think that, oh, that's what I should do. I should sit and sit and sit and sit and get over the pain, get a strong mind, and then they wind up having trouble by not being able to sit in a cross-legged posture at all.
Right. limiting
Mm-hmm.
rather than
So,
expanding.
so if we can see then that everything has to do with the middle path, it may be okay for you to sit, but if the leg starts to pain, then let's take the middle way out. Let's not sit in pain thinking that it's a good thing to do, that we're going to get some value and benefit from it.
Mhm.
This is also one of the reasons why at Watsu and Moke, they don't sit so long. They sit for about 30 minutes for the new ones. And even at the advanced students will sit only 45 minutes, like the Abbot of the Wat. You know that if the Abbot of the Wat is doing it for 45 minutes, that he's been doing it for many, many years. He's been a monk for 20 years or more to become the abbot. So we always have to find a middle path. And people will do meditation in the extreme. In fact, the Goenka retreats are generally referred to as an extreme, and also they even are referred to as kind of boot camp, because it's really, really hard to sit in pain for a long time, and that strong determination sittings, I don't think are very, very wise things to do. I will give you, though, one point about that, that I know of two people that if they came to me for the kind of training that they needed, I would give them strong determination sittings. What kind of two people? One would be CIA agents who are going into a place where they are likely to be captured and tortured.
Mm.
And so they need to learn to handle torture. And the way to handle torture correctly is by torturing yourself. That's an extreme, right? The Buddha talks about don't torture yourself, don't go to these extremes, and yet the strong determination sitting is extreme.
Mhm.
But if you've got the point that you might get captured and go into, now we're not talking about Dhamma people, we're talking about CIA agents who are trying to avoid having to talk to get out of the pain that they're in through torture. The way to do that is by training the mind to sit and sit and sit and sit and get over the fact that you don't like that pain and be able to learn to handle the pain. Now, that's not a middle path. That's not the teaching of the Buddha. But this is one way that we can talk about learning to handle pain, is by torturing ourselves, putting ourselves into that state of pain, and then maintaining it. So, we can talk about that also in the sense of weightlifting or, let us say, workouts, because people who work out generally have to deal with pain. They talk about it in the sense of no pain, no gain.
Mhm.
Now, there's a point with that, and that is that if you're working out and you have the workout is that you're going to actually break some of the muscle cells. You're going to strain them so bad that they're going to bust open and die. But then the regeneration process, which comes with itching and kind of pain, is that now those dead cells are going to be replaced with healthy cells. And so this is the idea of no pain, no gain, is that when they're working out, they work out up to the point of the pain. But if they keep working out over that pain and continue with the pain and continue with the pain, they're going to start breaking down a whole lot of muscles. And then they'll be in pain for days and days and days because they've worked out too hard, too strong. And so always we have to work with a balance. Where is that middle path? Or we can talk about it, what is the sweet point? The sweet point would be gaining the best value out of the situation. So no exercising at all is at one extreme, and exercising too much is at the other extreme. But finding a balance, just the right amount of exercise, so that we don't get very much pain, just a little bit of pain, and then we stop and let that healing process happen. Back to the sitting meditation, though, if we're sitting in with the legs in pain, then uh, some damage can happen that might, in fact, be permanent. Just like I was talking about several monks that they can't sit anymore because if they do try to sit the way, the pain comes back strongly immediately and they can't stand it. If they had the strong determination, I will sit, at least for a short time, then they might be able to build that back up. But all the teaching of the Buddha really has to do with the middle path. If you take one extreme, you're going to have dukkha. If you take the other extreme, you're going to have dukkha. But someplace in the middle is a sweet spot. Robert, glad to see you. Do you have any questions? Because I know you came in the middle of this.
No, just chilling out, just listening. Good to
Mm-hmm.
see you guys too.
Good to see you. So, Anna, does this answer your question, or shall we talk further about pain?
I'm trying to connect it to the mental trauma, and during your talk, I kind of frozen. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. And during the talk, I was kind of thinking about my first question when I came about this suffering of the saints and this attitude in Zen, which is like very known about. They beat their monks and they make them suffer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of trying to, and you speaking about if you will need to be prepared to be tortured. So somehow this mentality of being prepared to be tortured is just doesn't sound like only Western thing. It's a Zen was in East.
Yes, it is worldwide. I just gave you an
It's a high level of consciousness to be able to suffer and be cool about it. And so if you agent and you need to be prepared to be tortured, you're getting to some higher level of ability to teach or whatever. What is this?
Okay, well, this is actually an important point about being able to get a strong mind. A strong mind would be someone who can handle anything. They can handle it no matter what it is. Okay, they can handle losing a battle. They can handle losing a presidency. They can handle losing a loved one. They can handle the house burning down. They can handle losing their job. They can handle anything happily. That's a strong mind. Very, very few people ever develop that kind of a strong mind. And one of the ways that we can develop that strong mind is by putting ourselves under pressure.
I'm not sure about it. From my experience, you just get to post-traumatic stress disorder and you're not getting anything else from it. So it's not really.
Okay, well, post-traumatic stress disorder means that something happened and the person who had to deal with it did not have a strong mind. That in fact the stress that they were under actually kind of damaged their mind, just like sitting too long will damage the legs. So people do have a damaged mind because the stress that they were under, like having a bomb go off right beside us. Or maybe we have a good friend in the military with us and he pops his head up to see what's happening and his head gets blown off right beside us with all of his blood splattering all over us. Those are pretty heavy traumas that most people are not ready for.
But
They
if
don't have the
the
strength.
person sit for 12 hours, is it and in pain for 7? So is it not trauma? And they need to
Yes.
sit more and more. I didn't speak
Oh,
with
but
any
we have
monks.
had,
I kind of afraid that a lot of them traumatized as well by this type
right.
of teaching.
In fact, to be human is to have to deal with trauma. In fact, as a kind of a joke, getting born is a really big trauma. Being in childhood, being ordered around, being dressed, being fed, that's in a way is a trauma. Getting a spanking by daddy, that's a trauma. So we have to deal with traumas our whole life. There is no such thing as a trauma-free life. And if somebody does lead a trauma-free life, they don't have a very strong mind. So they can't handle trauma because they've never had to exercise with it. So the question that you're asking is, well, what if somebody has already had trauma that they didn't have the strength to deal with it? And now they remember that trauma. And sometimes it's kind of surprised. One of the examples of that is that this guy came back from Afghanistan and he seemed to be doing fine. He was all checked out by the VA and everything. 3 or 4 months went by, and then he was in bed sleeping, and his son came and jumped on him while he was asleep. He jumped on his dad in bed. That happens from time to time, okay? And mom heard the commotion, and she rushed into the bedroom to see her husband, who had just came back from Afghanistan, choking her son. He got up and grabbed that kid and started to choke him, and the wife had to pull him off. Now, under normal circumstances, he would have not done that, but he had been asleep, he was surprised, and that trauma jumped on him, and then he jumped on his son. So what can we do then to help people not jump on things the way that they do after a trauma? This is called the post-traumatic stress disorder, and people then can't handle those kind of traumas anymore unless we do it the way that is done with phobias for the psychiatrist. The example of that is the guy comes in, is afraid of spiders, and so he goes to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist says, "Oh, you're afraid of spiders? That's interesting because I've got a pet spider." And then the guy kind of freaks out. Okay? And so a little bit later, the guy says, "I've got that spider now. Do you want to see him?" And the guy kind of freaks out. And then the psychiatrist says, "Well, here it is. Here's the spider, but it's a plastic spider." And so we get the patient to pay with a plastic spider and recognize that there's no danger in the plastic spider. And that will help him then to get over his phobia of real spiders. So after we give him a plastic spider, then we get him introduced to a real spider at a distance and then move him closer. That what we're doing is we're unwiring the damage that was done immediately. So a way to handle that guy that's in Afghanistan is for him to get in bed, over the covers, and then after a little while, the son goes and jumps on him. And now, because he knows it's going to happen in advance, he's not going to strangle his son. Then the next time would be while he's asleep, that mom is standing there with him and the son jumps on the guy so that he can handle that. We can come out of those post-traumatic stress disorders slowly by approaching them one step at a time, like the phobia. So this is the way to handle that. But if people react very quickly without having the chance to think, in fact, what the strong mind is going to do is the strong mind is going to prevent that reaction that's instinctual. It's built into the instincts. And so the strong mind is going to take over that. Yes, go ahead.
It means we need to sit to make a strong mind, and it's not and we need to sit more, so to build it.
Right. In fact, what we're talking about.
I'm trying to connect the acute pain with the trauma. So I'm trying to find the main, middle ground in both.
Right, exactly.
So we're kind of getting to the same place, but what is the place? Middle, okay, but what is middle? We still need to have some amount of suffering.
Exactly.
What is the size of suffering?
A little bit of suffering. No suffering at all is one extreme, and too much suffering is at the other extreme. What the middle path then is just enough suffering so that we can train the mind to get stronger. Okay, here's an example of that. In tennis, the Wimbledon champion tennis players, they do an exercise that's not recommended for brand new students in tennis. What do? They put weighted bracelets on their arm so that there's got a lead weight on it. Now, what that does is that when they're practicing tennis, they've already built up a certain amount of power and a certain amount of speed. So what they need now to practice with these bracelets of lead on their arm is to get the power up so that they can continue to hit the ball, or start to be able to hit the ball with the power that they had that's being reduced. Their power is reduced by that weight. And also the speed. Can they get their speed back up with that weight that would be there without the weight? Now they take the weight off, and the power is even greater, and the speed is even greater. So we can actually work up by having a very little bit of weight and practice for a week or two, and then get a bigger weight and practice for a week or two, and then get even a bigger weight and practice for a week or two. And then we're building up real power, real strength, real speed. Guess what? We can do that with the mind also. We want to learn to test ourselves to see what we can handle. An example of that would be when the wife is yelling. Can we handle that? If she's yelling and yelling and yelling, can we handle that? Well, if she's yelling and we can handle that, then that's a training for when she's yelling and yelling and yelling and yelling and yelling and keeps yelling. Can you keep handling that? It's a buildup of strength that we want to test ourselves. Because if the guy is without any strength of mind at all, and she's yelling and yelling and yelling and yelling and yelling, he might have post-traumatic stress disorder over that, right? So here's the way that we handle it, is that we build up, but we always build up in the sense of the middle path, that we don't want to take it too far. We don't want to take it to any extreme. We want to leave things in the middle and let that build up. And this is how we could do it with our sitting practices. We can build it up. And so that's why I talk to students that call me normally and say, okay, let's only take it for a short time. Let's try and practice for 10 minutes. If you can get yourself into a really, really good state in 10 minutes, then what can you do in 15 minutes? Can you build that up? Well, we don't want to say 10 minutes today and then 15 minutes tomorrow. Oh, no, we want to do 10 minutes and 10 minutes and 10 minutes and 10 minutes and build that up to where we're getting really good value out of 10 minutes, and then we can go to 15. We always want to keep it at the middle path. But let's talk about it again with people who have post-traumatic stress disorders and things like this. Also, we build it up. Just like the guy with that's afraid of the spiders, the first thing that the psychiatrist is going to do, the very first step, is say, oh, I've got a pet spider. He does not bring a real spider. He does not take a transfer and have it crawl on the guy's face. You don't do that the first time. The first time you just mention, oh, I've got a spider. And then you work it up a little bit at a time, so that we're always keeping things in the middle path. We never go to an extreme. So this is also going back to then with the guy who's got the broken arm and he's using his hands too much. The better thing to do then for that kid is say, okay, put a sock on your hand. Now you can continue to use the hand, but you're not going to use it nearly as much as you did. So the middle path, but the extreme is say, stop using your hand, let the healing happen. Well, that's not going to work because the kids are not going to be able to go from the extreme of using the hand all the time to keeping it perfectly still. So there's a middle path in there, and that is by putting a sock on the hand, and that's going to limit the use of the hand. So as a professional, Anna, we need to find always to stay with the middle path when we're working with people, that we don't want to try to take them to the extreme against it. So if they've got this one extreme over here, we don't go to the other extreme. We just kind of move a little bit along the way until we can get to the middle point. And this is how we learn to handle pain also. An example of that is a mosquito bite. The normal thing that will happen when people get a mosquito bite now in the West, they're not so common. I don't think there's a lot of mosquitoes in New York, but here on this island, this is a mosquito paradise. We've got mosquitoes. Every day they come out in the evening, and every morning they come out. And so there's bound to be mosquito bites, and the mosquito bites itch. Now, the worst thing that one can do with a mosquito bite is what we normally do, just like a dog. When they've got itches and bites and whatever, they'll scratch, and they'll scratch furiously. In fact, Lucky will scratch so hard that the floor bounces. If she's on the bed will bounce while she's scratching. The dogs really do that. And that it comes from our DNA, the nature. If the dogs do it like that, that's also what we do. So if the arm is itching, we'll go to the extreme. That's damaging. But if we don't do anything at all, it's not going to heal. So the suggestion is don't get mosquito bites by having lavender plants or whatever like that. Yes, in fact, we do. I've got lavender mosquito coils here, Corey. And so the point, though, is that there's an extreme of doing nothing about the mosquito bite and letting it itch and itch and itch. And the other one is scratching and scratching and scratching. And the middle path would be by finding some sort of ointment and taking that ointment and putting it on the mosquito bite very gently with the thought of this ointment is going to handle this mosquito bite beautifully. Again, that's the middle path. So always begin to look for where we can find the middle path in things and learn to be able to build up so that if we are at one extreme, let's start working in the direction of finding where the middle path is between the two extremes, of either doing too much or doing nothing at all. So going back to that example of in Anapanasati practicing, no place to go and nothing to do, is to help the student relax right now. But that's not an extreme of never having any place to go and never have anything to do. We can't live like that. But the other extreme of being overly busy, doing too much, being too active, is the extreme on the other direction. And we need to come to find a balance. Yes, Corey, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a quick question.
Yeah.
So
is it quick? Is that a middle path quick?
it's kind of, yeah. It's about energy and dullness on the middle path, I guess. So I feel like I have a pretty good mix of balanced energy to where I could go do things, but I'm also like pretty relaxed. But I've always kind of like wondered what other people's opinion of, positive energy is like, because in meditation and, internal practice, like dullness is a kind of a big issue. And, in the suttas and scripture, that like the application of energy or enthusiasm is the antidote to it. Mm-hmm. And, so like what's like the middle pathway to energy between, like, how are you gonna generate, because neutral kind of is hard to get things done, so you, like the middle way of between frantic doing everything, doing like restless energy, or doing nothing, but then not neutral energy. So the balance of like good energy, but also specifically in relation to like the scriptures, obviously, because it's like virya and energy. So I'm kind of curious about that side of things.
Actually, you've just nailed something that I hadn't even thought about before. But now that we're talking about it, in the hindrances, sloth and torpor is at one extreme, and restlessness is at the other extreme. And someplace in the middle there is going to be relaxation.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So how can we find that? Well, we're going to have to experiment with it. You could also say it like this, and I'm not sure about this medically. We'll have to get some doctor or somebody who really knows what they're talking about. And that is that restlessness and anxiety and whatnot generally is because we've got too much adrenaline and perhaps too much cortisol in the bloodstream. But we cannot survive if we've got absolutely no adrenaline at all. That we need a little bit of adrenaline, that people will die, I would think, or at least not often go to sleep if they've got no adrenaline in their system at all. So there's also a middle path point about that, which we're talking about here in the sense of the hindrances, is that we don't have enough when we're sleepy, drowsy, that maybe we're that way because we've been working too hard. That's actually possible, that we can come in with the point of being uptight, anxious. We sit down, we start taking some deep breaths, we tell ourselves no place to go and nothing to do, and we'll go too far to the other extreme and become drowsy and sleepy. Now, at night, that's okay to do. If you're laying in bed and you're practicing anapanasati as you're going into bed and going to sleep, having things like, wow, this is really nice. I can just lay here and not have anything to do, and everything is really good, and I can just lay here and enjoy and let the body go into that area to where they go to sleep. That's great. Because the other extreme is people who have, let us say, insomnia, is because they want to go to sleep. They need to go to sleep. They've got all of this stuff to do tomorrow, and they're thinking about all they have to do. And so they're working themselves up into a state of restlessness with too much anxiety, too much adrenaline, and then they're worried why they can't go to sleep. And the doctors will naturally have some pills for that. But the way to handle it directly is by coming out of I need to go to sleep into it's okay that I don't go to sleep. I'm just going to lay here and enjoy myself. All right? But if we're actually sitting in meditation, like sitting at the Wat or sitting in a retreat, we don't want to take it all the way to the drowsy state. We want to leave it from getting out of the restlessness into alert rest, a resting state that's alert. The example that I would use is that the dogs will often be laying down, and you can look at the dog in their posture to see whether the dog is actually asleep or whether he's just laying there with his ears open, that he's alert, he's wakeful, he's watching what's going on. Any people who come to the door or whatever, he's going to be up and jumping and barking and all of that kind of stuff. He's ready for it. He's not asleep, but he's also not jumping and barking when there's nobody there. So there's this middle path, this middle balance area where we can stay alert and still be at rest. And this is the state that we want to get into in our practice of anapanasati when we're practicing for sitting for long periods of time. As the time wears on, can you maintain that alert, rested state so that we're watching what's going on? And if any pain comes up in the body, we can adjust that. We've been talking about knee pain, but there's also the issue of back pain. People begin to have back pain when they're practicing sitting too long. Well, one of the things that we can do about the back pain is to adjust our posture. Almost always back pain comes because the muscles have gotten tired by holding us up, especially if we're drooping over. If we're drooping over like that, then gravity is pulling us down, and holding it up requires some muscles in the back. But if we're sitting up straight, this is why the Buddha always is talking about straight. Okay, whenever he mentions go to the forest, go to the foot of a tree, go to an empty hut, and sit down erect to keep your posture upright. Because leaning one way or leaning another are always going into the extreme. But being able to sit upright is a middle place. It's the middle path. So become aware of everything that you're doing has to be at a balance, has to be at a middle path. An example of that with Christianity is that they've got a lot of rules, and if they would follow the rules, that would be the middle path. But what they do is either they don't follow the rules, which is one extreme, or they want to make everybody else follow their rules, which is another extreme. And you see that in Western Christianity now, getting into politics, wanting everybody to not have an abortion and all of this kind of stuff. Banning books in the libraries and going around saying, I have a rule, everybody's got to have that rule. That's an extreme. But having the rules and not following the rules at all is another extreme. So the balance point about those rules is, yes, let's follow the rules, but let's not hassle other people because they're not following my rules. And then we can investigate the rule, because a lot of the rules are one extreme or another. That when we come out of the rules at one extreme or another and have basically very few rules or no rules at all, again, that's a middle path. And so we can apply the middle path to many, many different things, almost everything that we do in life. That a runner, if he's running too slow, he's not going to win any races. But in a long race like a marathon, if he runs too fast, then he's going to waste his energy. He's not going to be able to do it. The runner on the marathons has to pace himself. He has to be in a middle place with it. So I can think of a lot of different middle paths. Corey, can you think of places you've already given us one that I think was brilliant? And that is the middle path between restlessness and sloth and torpor. Let's go experiment. That this is what we call by wisdom, is because we've got to look, we've got to play with it, we've got to experiment, we've got to find out what's going on so that we can find that sweet spot for our own selves. So, Corey, do you have any other ideas about that?
I guess the one that came to mind for me was kind of like doing the things that we've done in the past or doing something new. I think it's really easy to get into like a comfortable routine where you're doing what you've done in the past a lot, to the point that you're not really doing it in the middle way anymore. And I don't know, it's just like everything else. It's really comfortable to do what you know, or what's proven safe or what's proven successful. But it's like too much of a good thing. It's like anything else. You wouldn't really think, what the overdone point would be until you kind of hit it. But eventually you start to notice other things, just like stagnation or boredom or dullness. And then you could apply, like the balance and try to, not be affected by those things. But eventually the only way to really not be affected by them isn't to balance them out. It's to just stop doing the behavior that is, making that happen. So in this case,
but that's the whole point about coming to an abrupt stop, or can we slow down a little bit? That would be the same as like braking a car at high speed. If you slam on the brakes, everything in the back seat's going to slide around. All the people are going to be in the back seat's going to be in the front seat. The people in the front seat's going to have their face in the windshield, that kind of stuff. But if you don't stop at all, you're probably going to do even more damage by running into something. So the question is, and a good driver is going to learn just the right amount of braking. Not too much and not too little. This is actually the story of Goldilocks in a way. Not too hot, not too cold, just right, someplace in the middle. And so we need to find that place. Here's another example of that, is that when people are very, very young, for some reason or another in our culture, that's the time to learn. You go to school, then after school, you go to band practice, and after band practice, you go to soccer practice or whatever, and just the whole day is full of learning and learning and learning and learning and learning. And yet when people get old, they've already learned a lot, they know enough, and so they stop learning. And this is a place then where it's taught that, if people stop learning in old age, then the brain will go deteriorate, and they'll have, let us say, Alzheimer's or dementia or something like that. And one of the very best cures to make sure that an elderly person is not going to do that is by keeping them active. They may play games like Sudoku, but don't play the simple games. You got to go play the expert games. Or another one would be a computer programmer that learned code when he was in his 20s. Now that he's in his 80s, it's time for him to learn a new language, a language that they didn't have in 1965 or 1970, would be like Fortran, but now they've got PHP. If the old man will keep his mind active, then it's not going to deteriorate. Again, a middle path. So learning on one side and not learning on the other are both extremes. The kids, when they're in class and they're learning and learning and learning and learning and learning, they don't like it so much. Maybe they could find a middle path so where there's just the right amount of learning would be optimal. But the elderly, the same thing. If the elderly person will continue to learn, they'll keep their mind sharp and bright. So there's many, many different ways of understanding the middle path. But that's, as I said it right at the beginning, they should repeat it for the guys who've come onto the call recently. In the Dhammacakkappavanta Sutta, which is the one that is, let us say, widely known to be the very first teaching of the Buddha, where he was teaching the 5 friends he had that left him because he started eating when he figured out that he was killing himself with the flagellations that he was doing, starving himself, etc. And when he went back to them, he gave them their first sutta. And the first sutta he gave them, the first line of the sutta, the very first thing he taught them was the point about the middle path. That's how important the middle path is to the teaching of the Buddha. It's the very first teaching. It's the very first thing he said. Even when he later said that I only teach one thing, dukkha, dukkha nirodha, that dukkha nirodha, again, is that middle place, the sweet spot. And the dukkha is always one extreme or the other. So that if we can avoid the extremes in life, or if we find ourselves in a kind of an extreme point, like I can't handle being fussed at all, I've got no strength, and if somebody mentions something bad about me, I'll feel really bad, then we need to test that. That if the little girl comes home crying, said they call me fat at school, then mom should sit the kid down and says, okay, you're fat. Is that all right? Can you get used to the fact that you're fat? And then mom starts talking about it. And then later when mom says, oh, Kitty, you're so fat, ha ha. Can Kitty laugh at that, or is she going to re-traumatize herself with that? And pretty soon mom can train the kid through the middle path that when she is going back to school and the bullies call her fat, she can laugh at them. She doesn't have to feel traumatized by it. But very few of the mothers know how to train their kids to be able to handle criticism. So that's a strength of mind. Can you actually build up your criticism, or build up the strength of mind so that you can handle criticism? Because there's a lot of criticism out there. Just like the Christians are trying to make everybody follow the rules, people are out criticizing each other when it's really none of their business. It's actually not the business of those bullies as to whether Kitty's fat or not. But they're going to make a point of it. They're going to tease her about it. They're going to make her feel miserable. But if she could go get the training that she needs, maybe through a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist or whatever like that, can move her off of that being traumatized by criticism into the middle place to where she can handle it. She gets a strong mind so that anybody can say anything about you and it's not going to bother you. We can all train ourselves to find a middle path. so that nothing is going to bother us. It's not going to shake us. We got strength. We have the strength of mind, the strength of character to stay in the middle place, to stay in the middle path. So, Robert, do you have any comments about this?
No, just chilling out.
Just okay. All right. Are you chilling out in the middle path?
From time to time.
All right. Well, now you know how to build that strength so that you can handle being in the middle path. How about you, Corey? Do you have any last comments or any more questions or anything? Okay, great. Anna, how about you? Everything is correct. Oh, wow. Everybody's on that middle sweet spot right now. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you guys very much. This has been a really sweet middle path spot. Thank you so much.
Have a good one. It was nice coming and visiting everybody.
Yes. Well, Alex
Take
and
care, everyone.
gosh, we've had several guys leave already. But anyway, we'll see you guys again soon. Bye-bye.